My hospital has some stories. I have two that are personal. Also, I've had several people tell me that the radiology department is haunted by a man in a blue shirt. Never seen him, but when the televisions in the ER start acting up, changing channels on their own, volume going up and down, they blame the blue shirt guy from radiology. My first experience happened about 4 months ago, early summer. I work second shift and park beside the loading dock so that I don't have to walk all the way across the large parking lot in the middle of the night. Well, I was walking through the loading dock, which is deserted at that time of night, and all the lights are off, and I tripped on some signage that was sticking out. It didn't hurt, but it startled me, and I exclaimed, "Shit!" There was no one behind me, no one out in the hall, and like I said, the dock was deserted. Immediately after I said that, I heard a man's voice say, "You all right?" in a concerned voice. I laughed and said, "Yeah," and kept walking. It wasn't until I was halfway to my car outside that I realized there was no one who could have said that to me. This is also right across from radiology, so maybe it was the same dude feeling concerned. Second thing happened 2 nights ago. I have to check the surgical area for specimens in case there are any surgeries after hours. I have to walk through the dark lobby to get to the surgical area, which is no big deal. There's enough light from outside and this light and water feature to make walking fine. After checking for specimens on Friday, I was headed back to the lab and just glanced over at the gift shop, which has a couple of benches in front of it. I saw a girl with long dark hair sitting on one of the benches, and she was sitting kind of hunched over, looking at her feet. It took a heartbeat for my brain to realize that I had seen this, so I turned away from the gift shop when I realized it. I immediately looked back and there was nothing there. I even walked back a few paces and looked all around to see if it was something that could have tricked my mind into making this shape, but there was literally nothing. Nothing to cast shadows on those benches. This sighting actually made me uneasy, and I kept looking over my shoulder while heading down the hallway. If it was something supernatural, it was definitely more malignant. The third shift phlebotomist also told me about hearing music in the surgical area one night when she went to go check. She called out and checked, but there was no one around. She avoids going that way anymore. From August 2010 until May 2012, I worked as a security intern at a local hospital. I was only 16 when I began, and I thought it was the coolest job ever. And it was a very interesting job. Being security, I had access to every room in the hospital. I typically worked second and third shifts, which were 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. and 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. During the shift, we would have to do DTECs, which were basically security checks of the entire hospital. Being the low man on the totem pole, I usually got stuck with this job. But I didn't mind it because it was usually just an hour of walking and I got to snoop around. When I worked days, I never had any problems. I would hum to myself and talk to the staff. However, third shift was another story. I would hear and see things, especially in the cancer ward. It would feel like I was being watched. Possibly the scariest experience I had happened in summer of 2011. I was working third shift and I had been dispatching all night, so about 3 I got a break. I'd go smoke and then just walk for a little bit to wake myself up. So after I finished my cigarette, I decided to walk around the cancer center because they had a fridge with soda that we could take. I walked into the main hallway and past the chemo section. As soon as I passed the beds, an alarm started going off. There are no patients held overnight, and all the beds get unplugged by staff, so there was no reason that the alarm should have gone off. I booked my ass out of there immediately, and I swore I heard a female laugh as the door shut behind me. So this was last fall when me and a few friends went to an abandoned hospital mental asylum thing that was near the biggest skate park in the city. I told my mom that I was going to the skate park with some friends, which wasn't out of the ordinary, so she dropped me off and we hung out till everyone got there. We skated to the hospital and tried to find a way inside. While looking, I was looking at the top floor windows for some reason, and I saw what looked like a nurse in all white staring at us. After pointing it out to all of my friends, they agreed that it looked like a nurse. We continued to look for a spot when I decided to look through a crack in a wooded off window. It was the middle of the day, with the sun shining straight through the crack. While looking through, it was all light in there, but suddenly something moved past to my right, blocking the light for a split second. After having my friends look and say they see nothing, I ripped the wood off the window. I found out a few weeks ago that if a window or something breaks, a loud alarm goes off and automatically alerts the police. We opened up what looked to be an office area with 3 cubicles with a closet on one right side of the wall. My friend walked into the middle cubicle and I had my phone flashlight on, looking through the door in the hallway. My friend out of the window suddenly yells, "Get out of there, someone's in there." Me and my friend already freaked out and sprinted out of the room. My friend said that she saw a shadow of about 6'5" sitting in the back corner inside of the closet, stand up and sprint straight at my friend. My friend outside is 6'2" and the shadow was bigger than him. After flipping out, we walked back over to where the nurse was and it was gone entirely. About 15 years ago, I was working at a nursing facility that was set up inside an old hospital. It was the town's main hospital at one time, but had fallen into disrepair. The owners of the nursing home purchased the building and fixed up the first 3 floors. The 4th floor wasn't remodeled and was to be used only as storage. Since the staff had no reason to go to the 4th floor and the maintenance crew was still working up there, the main elevator was programmed to only stop on the first 3 floors. The maintenance men had a service elevator that they used to access the abandoned space. One night, I was tricked into being the building supervisor. One of my jobs was to go to all the floors, including the top, to check for eloping patients. When I got on the elevator, I pressed 1, 2, and 3, and then stopped on each floor to begin checking. When I finished the 3rd floor, I pressed the button for G, the ground floor. The elevator started going up, not down. My heart started racing because I didn't push the button. When the doors opened, the floor was pitch black. I poked my head out and someone gasped. Someone pushed the button to catch the elevator. The down arrow was lit up. I jumped back on the elevator and started hitting G over and over. I got off on the ground floor and got onto the service elevator. When I reached the 4th floor, all of the lights were now on, and the unit was a wreck with debris scattered everywhere. I jogged down the long halls, checking for stray patients or squatters. Just as I was approaching the nurse's station and had a clear shot of the elevator, the power went out. I yelped and ran to the elevator and got on. I pressed G and held my breath. Suddenly, the desk light inside of the old doctor's office clicked on. I hit the button repeatedly and returned to my floor. The elevator continued to stop on the cutoff floor, as did the power outages on that unit. Since there was no cameras at the time, I'd fib and say I'd checked the floor. I just stayed on the elevator and then did head counts. I did this until the day I quit, but I never set foot on the 4th floor again. After graduating high school, I went right into the Marine Corps and became an infantryman. I did 1 deployment to Afghanistan and 1 to Iraq. If you don't re-enlist or have enough time left to deploy again with your unit, they send you to the Fleet Assistance Program, basically odd jobs around the base. The majority of us are sent over to augment the military police, or NP. I, along with a handful of my buddies, were sent up to this smaller post called Camp Smith. It was an old naval hospital built during the late 1930s that sits on a hill overlooking Pearl Harbor. Nowadays, it's been renovated as a command post for higher-ups. There's a couple buildings and barracks. All the higher-ups come during the day and leave at night, so really the only people around 24/7 are us MPs. During the night shifts, you did a check of the main building before and after midnight. making sure the building was locked up and the interior rooms and vaults are the same. We usually did this with a partner. There were times we would check a wing, lock the door, and walk around 20 feet and hear it slam shut. This happened most often. It would be the only door behind us. One night, we got to the medical wing, which was supposed to be locked, but it wasn't, so we just had to walk it and lock up behind us. My partner and I walk in and hear a medical machine beeping at the end of the hallway. No big deal. We get to the end and there's nothing. But now the beeping is coming from where we walked in. Kind of creepy, but whatever. We locked up and continued on the patrol. You always had that feeling of people around you, watching you, but you were the only ones in the building, and the only other Marines even up were the 4 by the MP building and front gate. The time that stands out the most was when I had about 2 months left in the Marine Corps, so I would just pull my shifts and enjoy my time off. Definitely not a stressful time, especially compared to our lives in the infantry when deployed. I was doing the rounds by myself since we were short-staffed with guys at the range for a week. I go in for my rounds before midnight and check everything. Nothing to report. Then I hit it in at around 02:30 for my second check. I'm walking the halls on the second floor when I came to the main intersection of the 2 hallways, and I got this sharp pain on the left side of my rib cage, like a runner's cramp. At the same time, a door slammed down the hallway. Thinking whatever I have to head that way anyways to get the first floor, I start walking that way. Obviously, no one's there. Now down on the first floor, finishing those checks, I come to the same intersection in the hallways, and behind me I hear a loud whispered, "Hey," or "Stay." I couldn't make out which. Now the hair is standing up on the back of my neck. I turn around with one hand on my side arm and the flashlight down the hall and start walking back down that way. All the lights are off in the rooms and they're locked. I found nothing. I have one thing left to check, and that's the vaults in the basement. All is good, and I walk out the back onto a catwalk heading towards the NP shack, which is about 200 yards away. About 10 to 15 feet out the door, there's a tug on my lower left side just above my duty belt. It was enough of a grip to get a hold of my camouflage blouse, the bulletproof vest underneath, and pull me back into the left. I spun around to see if I was caught or if somebody was there, and there was absolutely nothing around me or above me or under me other than the ground. I didn't know what to believe. I got back to the MP building and must have had a look on my face because one of my buddies that I had been on those 2 deployments with did a double take and says, "Are you all right?" Not really being able to process what just happened, I said, "Man, you know me, right? I have no reason to lie to you." But something was talking to me in there, and then I was grabbed. His jaw dropped, and he didn't even smirk to see if I was fucking with him. I eventually told some of the actual MPs who had been there for a while, and I should tell them to come on here and share their experiences too, but I don't really care if people believe me or not. I didn't believe in this stuff either. And until you do, you will never understand the mindfuck that it truly is. I feel like hospitals should be full of ghosts and spirits, just because it's a place full of people close to the other side. I've worked in a hospital for almost 7 years now, and I've seen the life leave people's bodies and felt a presence, connection with people, but I've only had one experience that truly terrified me. I used to work nights. Thinking about a large, dark hospital full of quiet, sleeping people is kind of creepy, but I never felt that way. My job is to wake people up and draw their blood. I know I'm super popular at the hospital. And there's always been a wing of the hospital that makes me uneasy. I'm an amazingly upbeat person. I love my job and the patients, but the minute I walk onto that wing, I'm uneasy. And something makes me look over my shoulder and want to leave. So one morning around 3 o'clock a.m., I go into this wing to stick a patient, feeling queasy. I walk into the patient's room, not knocking because it's so late. The lights are all off, and I see someone standing in the far corner away from me. I'm immediately taken aback, but quickly think it's just a nurse hanging blood or something. I look at the figure and ask, "Do you need me to come back?" No response. It turns toward the corner, slowly, and just stands there with its back to me. My whole body is on edge, and I've never felt so scared in my life. I knew without a doubt that it wasn't a nurse. I back out of the room and walk towards the nurse's station. I just lean against a wall, trying to catch my breath. A nurse asks if I'm going to be sick. I had to go back into the patient's room and draw her blood. This time I turned on the lights before I even stepped inside. Of course there was no one there except for the sleeping old lady. I quickly drew her blood, trying to ignore the sinking feeling that someone was standing right behind me and watching me. I hate that wing, and that room will forever give me the tingles when I have to go into it. It's been years, but I won't forget it. I worked security at a small facility. Formerly a full-service hospital, it was now mostly an outpatient clinic, and the only overnight guests were the residents of the secure psych wing and the patients in the sleep studies wing, aka the sleep lab. On the weekends, the place was deserted except for the psych wing. Being in the psych wing was strange and creepy and scary, because of all the details mentioned and all the other stories you can find on the internet. Being in the sleep lab was strange and creepy and scary because it was on the other side of the hospital, as far from anybody else as you could be. Isolated in its own wing, dimly lit, and with some serious soundproofing in the walls. Furthermore, legend had it that back when the facility was a full-service hospital, the sleep lab used to be the morgue. So the ghosts of everyone who had ever died at that hospital were concentrated in that area. If you were in the sleep lab by yourself, it was said, the ghost would talk to you. Nobody seriously believed this, of course, but if an IT guy got called in to repair some equipment or housekeeping had to clean the area on a weekend, security would get called to check the area or even be asked to remain so they wouldn't have to be there alone. One quiet weekend, I was making my rounds through this facility. I passed through the secure psych wing and everything was fine. Most of the patients were hanging out in the day room, chatting with each other. As I passed by that room, I noticed one patient had a loud, clear, deep bass voice. It really stood out because most of the patients were female. I continued on, checking the rest of the facility, and I eventually came to the sleep lab. When I checked inside, I met up with one of the housekeepers. This particular housekeeper was one who had laughed along with me about the people who couldn't work in that area without a security escort, so I was surprised at her words. "I was just about to call you. There's a ghost in here. I can hear him talking." I assured her that there was no such thing as ghosts and checked the whole wing to show her we were alone. I was about to tell her how crazy she was when I realized that I was also hearing someone talking. It was quiet, but it was definitely a human voice. As I listened closely, I realized it was the same clear, deep bass voice that I had heard in the psych unit. Oh crap. A mental patient had gotten out of the secure area and was in the sleep lab with us. From the sound of the voice, a very large mental patient. I tried to get the housekeeper to leave the wing or at least lock herself in an office, but she wasn't letting me out of her sight. Again, I checked every room in the wing and found no one. When we stopped moving around and kept quiet, however, we could still hear the voice. Again, I checked every room, this time stopping every few steps to listen for the voice. I finally found the source of the voice in the monitoring room, where they had video and sound from every patient's sleep room. In one of the patient's sleep rooms, the television had been left on. The television audio played out of the same device that doubled as a nurse call button attached to the bed. This device had been left sitting on the headboard of the bed, very near the video camera with which the staff could monitor the patient sleeping all night. The microphone on the camera was picking up the very quiet TV audio, and it was playing it out of a speaker in the monitoring room, much louder, but still so quiet that you could only hear it if you were listening for it. The show was some kind of interview show, and the host had a very loud, clear, deep, and bass voice. We turned off the TV and everything was quiet after that, except that from now on, this housekeeper joined the group that always asked for a security escort when she had to clean the wing over the weekend. It was a completely normal source, but it was still creepy until we figured it out. I work as a nurse in my day job, caring for the sick and elderly. Every night before I take over the unit, I walk from room to room, performing a head count and safety check. 2 days ago, when I was entering the third room from the last, I happened to look up and see a person standing by the window. It was a female in her 30s with shoulder-length brown hair and a white top. A shadow covered her face, but I noticed her shoulders were tensed up, almost hunched, like I had startled her. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. I quickly broke eye contact and stepped out of the room, continuing my rounds. At this facility, we have security, visitor logbooks, and staff doing safety checks. You can't get onto the floor without being seen by someone. The spookiest part of the whole experience is that she's not the first person I have seen in the moonlight, standing over the invalid patients. I just ignore them, but it's always eerie when they're there. Years ago, when my grandfather was still alive, my mom and my grandpa were together. He was in the hospital and she was sleeping in a comfort chair at his side. Every now and then a nurse would come by to see how he was going and give him his medicine. He has a rare disease, similar to lung cancer. So one day he woke my mom up in the morning and said, "Who are all these people dressed in white around me? Sometimes I see them, and today I saw them. What were they doing here?" My mom didn't know how to respond. Later the nurse came by and he asked her the same question. The nurse gave him a scared look. The hair on her arm raised, and she put her hand on her arm and just got out of the room in complete silence. She freaked out and never tended to him again. They sent another nurse. But my father wasn't afraid of that. A little more than a month later, he told my mom that he had seen angels and that he thought they were taking care of his soul. He died in peace, and I really believe what he said. I hope he is well in the peace of God. This happened in a city in the north of peninsular Malaysia. My family was visiting my wife's cousin who had just given birth. She was in a room with 6 beds. 5 of the beds were occupied, and each bed had a curtain that could be pulled around the bed. It was visiting hour, so the curtains were mostly pulled back, and there were visitors at all of the beds. The cousin was in the middle bed, and the last bed was occupied, but the bed opposite that one was empty. There were people visiting at the last bed. One of them was a young girl of perhaps not more than 7. As people were chatting, the girl suddenly cried out in anger, "Leave my auntie alone!" Everybody looked at her. Her mother went beside her and asked, "Who are you talking to?" "Him." It could also be she, because in Bahasa Melayu the pronouns are not gendered. She said this while pointing to the spot just above the empty bed. "What's he doing?" asked the mother. "He's making faces at auntie." Her mother then said to her, "That's okay, he won't do anything. Come, let's go get a drink." She then led the girl out of the room. I think she was trying to calm her down. I did some asking, and I was told that that wing of the hospital is reputed to be haunted, and it was the oldest building in the hospital complex. I guess kids really can see ghosts. I later realized that the mother didn't seem surprised at all at what the girl had said. It was as if it was something perfectly normal for her to say.